So the final thing I want to look at is the deliver page, which is where you get stuff out of Resolve. So you can see I've got several settings along the top here, which have got presets for, say, going to Premiere or Final Cut Pro or Avid. The main ones you probably use will be the custom one or going to YouTube or Vimeo. So say let's choose the YouTube preset. If I click on that, it's set the thing up for YouTube. And if I click on the drop down, you can see my options are to do a clip at 720p or a clip at 1080p. Now since my edit's 1080, I could do a 1080p clip to go to YouTube. It'll just be a little bit bigger and therefore take longer to upload. And that'll set everything up for it, and all you really do is you decide where it's going to go. At the moment it's going to go to the E drive, and then you add it to the render queue, and then you click Start Render, and it renders it. And it's going to take as long as it takes, basically. Obviously, when it gets to the effects, it takes longer, but eventually it'll be done, and then you'll have a file that you can upload onto YouTube. Now, the YouTube files this makes up are all QuickTime files, because this doesn't do MPEG-4 files. Now, I tend to do MPEG-4 files for YouTube and for going to other places and TV playbacks and stuff like that. It doesn't do MPEG-4 files. Let's go back to the custom heading and then just look at some of the options that we've got. So, for example, on the file types that you've got, you have QuickTime files, these things, MXOP1A files, which is a new type of video file, and then a bunch of still images. And you might say, oh, well, it says AVI file. Let's go to AVI file. If you choose AVI file, the only type of AVI files you can do are either completely uncompressed or a Cineform file. Now, Cineform's a nice codec. It's owned by GoPro. It does very good quality stuff. Not particularly small. It's nothing like an MPEG-4 file. So, you know, it is a Cineform file. And you can't play it back unless you've got the Cineform codec installed on your computer. So that's something you've got to be very wary of, because you'll export it and then you won't be able to play it back at all. You could do uncompressed, but that's going to be huge. So basically the AVI output options are very, very limited, and you can't add more stuff in. I can't say let's go out to Canopus HQ or some other format. It only does what's here. So most of the time I probably will end up doing a QuickTime file, because at least I know they can be read by lots of different things. And under QuickTime, you don't have all the options you'd normally expect to get in a QuickTime exporter. You've got some more Cineforms. You've got all these Avid formats. Now, the Avid formats are only useful if you install the Avid codec, which is actually free and something I install on practically every system, so it's not the end of the world. But, you know, you have to get the Avid codec to do that, and you've got a few Avid formats. You've got uncompressed, and you've got Grass Valley. So it's Grass Valley HQ or HQX. And apart from that, you've got H.264. Now, H.264 is how we would normally make an MPEG-4 file, and that's what it chose for YouTube. So that's going to make a fairly small file for you to upload. And the H.264 encoding out of this is pretty good. It's not as good as some other encoding, but it's okay. So yes, if all I wanted to do is go to YouTube, I could do that with a QuickTime file. YouTube will accept it, job done. But if I want to go to another program, it's more problematic, and it is a matter of which out of these formats are you going to choose. A lot of the time I use the Avid formats because it actually makes those up fairly quickly. Of course, at the moment there's been a lot of kerfuffle about QuickTime for Windows and how the American government's saying you should remove it for your computer because it's dodgy. So given that your biggest way of exporting stuff is QuickTime, and they're telling you to get rid of it, that's not that brilliant. But that's what it does at the moment. Just like everybody else, Blackmagic are going to have to get rid of their support for QuickTime to Windows. Who knows, maybe something useful will be added in here at the end. But at the moment, it's very little. It's QuickTime files, very limited AVI files, bunch of still images, or these MXF OP1A files. And that can be done in an Avid format, or maybe in a Sony XD Cam format. But not every program supports MXF OP1A files, and a lot of player programs don't support it. That's why QuickTime is probably a more obvious thing to go for. And it'd be nice if there were more options on the output. You know, just no MPEG-2, nothing you could possibly put onto a DVD, no Blu-ray formats. If I want to make a Blu-ray out of this, I'm going to have to export it as something and then encode it in another program. So I'd probably do a QuickTime file, then go into another program and load that up and let it encode it for me to go onto a DVD or a Blu-ray disc. There are some advanced settings down here. You notice the ones down here that say use render cached images is not ticked, so it's not using those files that I rendered as I was editing. So that's why it didn't really matter too much what my render format was. And I like to sometimes tick these ones, just force the sizing and the debayer. The debayer is the way it plays stuff back. Force them to the best quality, so even if I set other things during the editing, it will actually use the best quality on rendering. But then, you choose something and add it to the queue. Important things to think about here are, apart from the video and the audio settings, which are pretty straightforward, on the file settings, it's basically where's it going to go and what's it going to be called. You could actually call it the same thing as the timeline, or you could call it something else. But the main things are these ones up here, single clip or individual clips. So if you choose single clip, it's going to take the whole timeline and then render it out as one big clip, which is what you want to do 99% of the time. But if you are doing something like bringing in a bunch of clips and then you want to grade them and then send them out to another program, you might go to individual clips. Because if you choose individual clips, each one of these gets rendered as a separate clip with the effects on, which you can then take into the other program and then replace the originals with. Now again, could go through that a lot. I'm not going to, mainly stick to single clip. You can stack a couple up in the queue. So let's add that one in. Let's do a, an AVI Cineform file. And let's add that one in. Yeah, this one's already done, so let's get rid of it. So I've now got a couple of clips in the queue. If I just select both of them, and as they start render, it'll go off and do one, and then it'll do the other one. So it'll render both of those for me. But that's it. It is pretty simple. Basically, you choose a format. The formats are limited. You add them to the queue. You render them. The only other thing that's sometimes thrown people when using this is they're used to being in their editing program and putting an in and an out point on the timeline, and then choosing to export that. So in, out, go to deliver, add it to the queue, render it. You're going to expect it to do it between the in and out point on the timeline, and it doesn't. You notice down here there's a render range, and it's either the entire timeline or between the in and the out point. Well, even though I've chosen between in and out point, it's not actually using the in and out point, which is in the edit tab, because the export has a different in and out point. So in this case, I'd have to come in here and put an in point and an out point on there, and then it would export that section. So just remember, the in and out point on the edit is not the same as the in and out on the deliver. And that's something which has thrown people because they're expecting it to be.